so we're good?
I think, let's see.
We're in economics. Okay. Well, welcome everybody. My name is Lindsay Sandrowski. I am the track leader for economics. I, along with Sarah Abdi, are going to lead you through the next 2 days of economics presentations. Up next, we're going to have Amber Roberson from Carbon present. So let me bring Amber up on stage.
Good morning.
Hi, good morning, Amber. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thanks for asking.
Great. Great to have you. I am going to stop sharing this and give you presentation power. We are looking forward to hearing from you. So take it away.
Absolutely. Let me work a little bit on the presentation. Okay. Let me get everything aligned. I see. Hi. Perfect. Audio check. We're all good. Lindsay?
Looking good. I can see your screen.
Perfect. Thank you everyone so much for having me today. I really look forward to talking more about 3D printing, but through the lens of supply chain. And we'll walk through a couple of what's happening in the marketplace. There's some, I would say there's a lot going on in supply chain overall, but dissecting and where does 3D printing have its place within this. In years past, the global supply chains were so productive and reliable that, they were practically invisible to consumers. I remember the first time that I got my Amazon, it was my 2-day delivery, but it actually arrived the same day. And I was like, how does this happen? And with an understanding everything from the logistics and the software and the components, that everything comes together to make that package come to me so seamlessly. It's really, like I said, it's interesting now that it's come into the forefront of our conversation, general table talk conversation. And the reality is, before the pandemic, it was rarely discussed about these business cycles and how the supply chain actually works. Now that the problem is right here in our face, many of the aspects of our lives have been, I would say, impacted by the supply chain. So we're going to talk a little bit about, everyone's talking about supply chain. Even my mother's talking about it. Like, who's not talking about it? We'll talk about major trends, not only what's happening now, but the future of supply chain, and really looking through that from the eyes of a 3D printing technology. Look, there's bumps in the roads, or high seas, we could say that way, with ships, or canal issues as well. We'll also give a real life example of how 3D printing has helped with the supply chain here in the last 2 years, and then impact today, what we can really take away from this and move forward. So I live in Minneapolis, and there's this great art center called the Walker Art Center. And it was about 5 months ago, and we went to an exhibit. This is a picture of the exhibit. And we walked in, and we were with another couple, and one person said, "Oh, wow, look at all these chairs, but a lot of these chairs are missing the seat." And the wife quickly responded of like, well, it must be a supply chain issue. So, I thought it was interesting that, we're even talking about it at art exhibits, even though this is supposed to symbolize, IBM and the blue and the original IBM chair and the deconstruction of IBM and the changes. But immediately we start talking about supply chain and not being able to get those seats. There are plenty of fingers to point when considering how the supply chain has reached this level of crisis. And again, everyone has their opinion, but it really started with the coronavirus outbreak. And then the continuation through stockpiled shipping containers in diverse places and personnel shortages because of coronavirus, and also just because of the Great Resignation, that it really has been a bit of a snowball for us. But it all ends with the same problem for many companies. And the problem is there's a shortage of vital parts. So fortunately, the tools are already in place for many companies to avoid a lot of these external hiccups in product development that are brought on by supply chain problems. We're going to see like these next generation cloud-based systems and software and additive manufacturing, 3D printing are really letting companies design and prototype and refine these complex structures on a single platform, and then bring that manufacturing much closer to home. According to, I did some research, looked up some supply chain stats, and according to Hub Supply Chain Resilience Report, 75% of US-based companies have experienced external disruptions to their manufacturing supply chain in the last year. Now, even though 98% of those companies believe that measures need to be taken to avoid future future disruptions, only 63% have actually done something about it. So we have this problem. It's going to persist, and not everyone is acting. And so we'll talk a little bit about today about where does 3D fit into that. I really do believe that 3D printing for the first time is giving executive leaders the power to rethink the relationship with the supply chain and internal operations by really taking a holistic approach to this cross-functional capacity and improving really both the bottom and top line. For example, if there's a supply chain disruption in a traditionally manufactured product, the purchasing team might spend 9 months trying to seek out alternatives. They would have to redesign, perhaps. They would need to look at the new process from scratch. They would need to look at new tooling, minimum orders, molds. Whereas with 3D printing, you could really take that 9, 10, 12-month cycle and could condense it down into a matter of weeks. COVID has created really, I would say, an imbalance. And we'll talk about some of these major trends that we are seeing in the overall supply chain. And this imbalance really is I would say, greatly impacting the overall ecosystem of this, again, very fine-tuned, well-orchestrated, but fragile supply chain that we've had. 12 months ago, we were, getting quotes from vendors that would expire in 90 days. And now, I've seen those, my last company, quotes would expire in 48 hours. And why is that? It's because it was so unknown. We didn't know what was going to happen or if even these parts were going to be available. So our vendors were just so gun shy about putting new pricing around it. It was so volatile for us, and it still is. So, what we're seeing as far as how we have this shift in the supply chain is really planning ahead, whether it's for, a company supply chain or even planning ahead for a weekend getaway with your friends. It isn't so much about knowing what's going to happen. It's about preparing for what could happen. And that's what really happened for us overall, is that the could have happened really did happen. you can't possibly predict the future. I would love to. My 8-ball is still not working quite right, but you can't plan for the probable and the arrangement and making those arrangements accordingly to what could happen. There's no secret that the supply chain tends to be less than predictable. There's been a series of social and economic micro shocks that have radically affected how consumers shop and how they even interact with brands. I mean, think about how you've changed in the last 12 months to 24 months about how you're interacting with your brands. And I would say the consumer experience is going to continue to shift, and supply chains are going to have to shift with it. And these organizations are having to really rethink it. And the ones that are most successful at this are the ones that are adjusting their supply chains in advance of these big coming trends. They're planning ahead, not because they know exactly what's going to happen, but because they know something will happen. And I always think about, what are some of the ways that organizations are planning ahead? And really, 3D printing is a tool in that toolkit that can be used to help with that unknown. It may not be used all the time, but it's a tool that we can pull out, dust off, and use it when it's appropriate and when it's right. I would say one thing I have learned, and one of my dear friends actually runs a global supply chain for one of the computer manufacturers, and so I was asking her a lot about what she's seeing and being really boots on the ground. And one of the things she gave me some great examples, and she said one of the things that people don't always realize is that there is really this like component and raw material mismatch right now in the ecosystem. And the example she gave was like body wash. She said, think of you're going to be making body wash, and think of all the items that are required to make this body wash. A manufacturer is going to need labels and the bottles and enough caps. And they may need fragrance to really make this complete finished good. And she said that she read somewhere in the surveys that about 40% of inventories in manufacturing right now is mismatched. So, I mean, they're just like waiting for one small component to be able to finish this off. And so so when I look at that, like, if the caps are mismatched, is there something that can happen? Are there ways that 3D printing could come in and fill that gap to really help rebalance that ecosystem? And then I would say the last major trend that we're seeing is that last mile. It's going to continue. The micro factories, we're seeing it more and more, especially here in the US. I think this is really interesting where 3D printing can make and will, as the technology grows, a big difference is really changing those business models and being able to do it a just-in-time production instead of mass production. But we need to weigh the cost, right? And it's not there for every case, but when you're looking at this technology and where 3D printing could potentially plug into these micro factories, that is the next major trend, and ultimately getting closer to that customer. When we think ahead, like bigger rocks of what's happening, we're managing the world. We're always going to have barriers that are really complex. There's going to be challenges to, I would say, the executives and professionals of how they're working through their current supply chains or structure based off of these, I would say, these three main pillars. But they're used to dealing with big geopolitical and technology and global resourcing and black swan events. But again, what are those next areas that we are likely to continue to see? And we saw in the last 24 months, the geopolitical environment, we're going to see more of that, where it's going to influence what and where we're actually manufacturing. Sustainability, I absolutely am so thrilled that this is real. With me having two small children, I want to make sure that we are leaving a world for them and their children to be able to flourish. And so when we look around, where does 3D printing fit in sustainability? I think there's there's a phenomenal business case for it, and really bringing it more local production and reshoring. And then technology, how our technology is going to work together. I mean, we're going to see the integration of different types of technologies, specifically the robots and 3D printing. I mean, we've seen the robots explosion here in the last 12, 24 months. It's, KUKA can't even keep robots on their shelf. But really having that full integration with 3D printing, it was going to be able to take that technology to the next level. So it's not necessarily it's a one-off. It is actually part of that ecosystem and driving, like we said, that getting closer to home, getting closer, from that reshoring and that last mile type configuration. So why 3D printing? I mean, I've said it a couple times already, but the reality is printers can be found at every target in the supply chain right now. But are they being properly utilized? Is everyone aware of it? These are the three things I see where 3D printing can absolutely make a difference in the supply chain. One is, the advantages of additive manufacturing for companies, dealing with any type of supply chain woes, really begins with that digital efficacy and efficiency as well. So not only is it good, but is it also efficient? Your company's products, essentially exist in a software file, right? Until it's sent. This could be sent via the cloud. And then a 3D printer can be located virtually anywhere back to that end customer, as we've been discussing. So guess what? There's no container ship. There's nothing necessary. No ship's going to be stuck in the Suez Canal. So this is, I think, a really interesting trend, and where 3D printing can really make an impact right now today. I mean, we're already seeing it with the military and the utilization of additive manufacturing as well for their own supply chain. The next is really shrinking that distance to the customer. Consumers the manufacturers can eliminate additional cost and logistics by putting that product closer to the consumer. So think about, these micro factories can also be this customized. It is back to that last mile, like we were saying. Your factory can be located within, much closer to that end user and where the customer lives versus shipping it across, the world. However, again, the price point, that's a huge consideration. Until the price point is there, it doesn't necessarily make sense yet. But with a broken supply chain and the technology, the 3D printing technology improving, we're going to see those areas where it does make sense to use the printing. And then the last piece of it really is, cloud software tools are letting designers and engineers prototype, iterate, refine these complex, structures. And I just think it's so important that we're going to not waste time and waste material. And that is, again, another area right now where 3D printing can get in really quickly, is that fast iteration. And when time and speed are absolutely critical to be a remedy for the supply chain, and where I would say, not that you're not as worried about the cost, but you have a problem that you need to exercise right now, that's where we're seeing 3D printing win. But the risk, there's so much risk here, right? I mean, the global supply chain problems, they're not going away anytime soon. If anything, we're likely to see there's likely to be some relief after the holidays, that many experts think that there will be some normalization of the supply chain, enabling it to catch back up. But the cracks have been shown. The facade is down. We're still aware of it as consumers, and the consumers are going to demand. And so these ecosystems do have to shift to demand. So we need to stop thinking of this as a crisis, and recognize that the world, quite frankly, has changed. And so will the manufacturing model. It will take, let's say, for manufacturers that have the wisdom to see this and see ahead, are the ones who are going to win eventually. Being able to be nimble and be able to be quick are the ones who will be successful on the back end of this, I would say, reinvention of the supply chain. However, for many business leaders, it means rethinking long-standing cost-benefit assumptions. I mean, fortunately, when companies are considering a move towards 3D printing, the product and procurement officers are often even more engaged in the conversation and very excited because they've been wanting and they've seen this tool for a long time. Engineers and designers spot those advantages and they'll take it. And it'll take a little convincing because they already know where this technology can fit into enabling. However, it's really that mind shift and getting to those right people. And I would say those cost benefit models, they haven't always played well with the 3D printing, those legacy ones. So I would encourage you, as you're talking about that, you really have to educate and see through the lens of 3D printing, but also understand their point of view of what models they're using currently right now, and making sure that that is aligned. The real challenge with 3D printing tends to come from, quite frankly, the head of manufacturing, who is very cautious about time and money and what it's going to take to overhaul some, quite frankly, fundamental processes in their systems. Fortunately, with recent advances in 3D printing software, it can be much less capital intensive than the previous generations of injection molding and other methods of manufacturing. And that's before cost saving on shipping. And then I also would say that looking at production partners can really help companies get up and running much more quickly at a lower cost than they may think. So I would encourage you, again, when the cost piece of it is going to be something that you will have to work through with those customers. Also, I would say as materials progress, I would say the readiness will become more important. I mean, for the real manufacturing leaders, being able to prototype and actually get to that production, even if it's the low volume production, is really going to be critical for them. And they want to know, they want to understand the process, but really trust that the end product meets what they need and what they've been utilizing as well. So definitely a risk, or I say a hurdle you're going to have to overcome there on some of the education. But that's where I say, as the technology improves, as we have access to more materials and resins, and it's going to do nothing but lift the industry up, where some of these risks that were of old's past will be really put to bed. Companies that are, I would say, don't really think about the supply chain and are adapting, they're like only 68% have actually done something about it. The other side of it, who aren't doing anything, I would say not embracing 3D printing is a risk. They need to become familiar with it so they know when to pull that tool out of their bag. If they're not familiar with it now, getting them up to speed quickly, they're going to miss the opportunity when there is an opportunity to utilize 3D printing right now in their ecosystem. So I would say those that stick to the old traditional ways of, being left to hope that their ships will come in, well, we've all seen that. Ships might be stuck offshore, waiting to come in for a while. Here COVID hit all of us, and here at Carbon, we did some, I would say, addressing the supply chain right away. And really it came down to, and if everyone rewinds back to almost 2 years ago, that there was this unbelievable shortage of, face shields and masks. I mean, we all remember those photos, right, of the healthcare workers bleeding, and people were sewing masks, and like, what else, what can we do to enable our healthcare workers to protect them and be that front line? And that's where, I would say Carbon really shifted quickly and was agile about addressing some of those needs. And really 2 things came out of it was the nasal swab. We'll talk a bit about that here in a second. And then also the face shields and being able to print those very quickly and opening up. I have a quick video I'll show you guys.
At Carbon, our purpose is to improve lives with science, technology, and creativity. When COVID-19 hit and we saw a world confronted by medical supply shortages, we knew we needed to do something. We brought together our employees, partners, and customers to address two needs. First, protect healthcare workers. Second, increase testing capacity for COVID-19. Digital light synthesis, our 3D printing technology, is enabling the protection of those on the front lines by making up to 50,000 face shields a week. And more accessible testing thanks to resolution medical lattice swabs, crafted with carbon technology. Together, we're making what the world needs now.
So again, if you think back,
At Carbon, our purpose is to improve.
if you think back from the concept we had of, okay, there's a shortage of nasal swabs, what can we do? It was literally 20 days to launch. I mean, that's a perfect example of how we were able to really circumvent the supply chain and make immediate impact when it was appropriate. And we had, you know, March 19th, I mean, like March 12th, I remember that day in history, but March 19th was like, okay, there's a swab shortage. One of our engineers was thinking about the lattice structures that we're able to do and like, how could we potentially do that with the swab? Went through a couple iterations, worked with one of our partners in our network, and was able to bring that and launch with a Class 1 medical device in 20 days. So I'll lead you with this. COVID-19 demanded a significant change from virtually every company in all industries. I mean, this decades-old model of global manufacturing and long-distance supply chains became overextended and, quite frankly, had too many fragile links in the overall structure. Companies embracing innovation will move much faster and will secure more pathways from concept to market. I mean, it's become foundational for these companies and industries, everything from auto to med supply, because the ability to create and iterate these products exclusively on a single platform, cloud-based systems makes all the difference, and not having to wait for something that literally is out of reach and out of touch. I would say products and procurement teams will definitely appreciate having more control over the work and less reliance on offshore partners. Being agile and speed and the decentralization of manufacturing is the revolution. You have to act fast. You have to know when to act. But if your partners and your customers don't understand the technology that they would have access to, they act. So we've got to do a better job as an industry of really educating people on where, I'd say 3D printing is a potential tool to help relieve some of these constraints of the supply chain overall. I mean, like I said, 3D printing, it's a tool. It's a tool in our bag. It's a powerful one. And we've got to show it. We got to show the value now and not let it be a back office experiment. Now, as the world continues working through this global supply chain issue, 3D printing provides a path forward. It's shrinking the length and reducing the number of links in the supply chain, eliminating many of these logistics snags and costs and shortages and challenges with people and overall manufacturing. And the customer and the companies that are determined to stick with this are going to win. And the ones who don't and go to the old ways, they risk the never-ending series of supply chain problems for the rest of that product cycle. Thank you. I'm going to open it now to questions. Let me see. I've got some questions over here. Hi, Amber. What are the challenges you see in adopting 3D printing to improve supply chain? So, I think we talked a bit about that, right? It's one, it's basic education. Two is knowing where where 3D printing actually works. I mean, we've all read the articles where like 3D printing is going to revolutionize supply chain. It's not. It's going to be a piece of the puzzle to ultimately providing another tool again in their toolkit. I think it's a paradigm is one of the biggest challenges as well. And then understanding those cost models that, again, where does it make sense for 3D printing? Question number 2, do you think there is a shortage of skilled 3D modelers and designers? I mean, I would say we're always working to what can we do to enable that part. And with me, I would say being of a certain age, I'm not a digital native, but I look at like my children and where they are, like that is going to be part of how they think, and they're already doing that. And so as this next generation comes through of designers, it's really going to be, again, it's just, they're already going to have access to it, but we are in this transition phase right now in the labor force, and also with our general labor force challenges. Next question, Amber, what about the challenge of lack of capacity by 3D vendors to support manufacturing production quantities usually needed? Yes, but there's also, I think it has to be like, what is the quantity? I mean, we're seeing high volumes, into the tens of thousands of being printed with some of our partners. So it is capable and it is able. I think it's about what that right product is and making sure you're finding the right partner, whether it's going to be the OEM's going to take it on, or if they're going to go through a contract manufacturer. There's several contract manufacturers out there that are able to take on the tens of thousands plus, and at a right price point as well. No 3D printing technology can currently keep up with production quantities. It's great research and low quantity situations, but mass production turnaround is not fast enough in current. And that's true. Like I said, it really depends on what it is, and if it is that lower volume, and that's where I think this like last mile and more customization, it can lend to there. But we're only going to see, as we said, that the trend of robotics and 3D printing coming together with the speed and really having that true integration, then some of those barriers will be removed. But we are seeing production, like in our Adidas midsoles, at a really high volume. And one last question. What about the ecological impact? Does 3D printing potentially smaller carbon footprint? And believe me, I hate how I sound saying this, give an advantage over traditional manufacturing? Absolutely. And that's just some of the things that as and like I said, I can't be more excited that organizations are really understanding how sustainability, now they have to have the responsibility for it, but also for our overall, humanity, that 3D printing absolutely can be something. And you'd have to look at the individuals, but overall, the sustainability usually lands on the side of 3D printing versus traditional, especially when you're looking at subtractive type manufacturing. How do you effectively communicate value to clients when you are creating a novel solution to problem and when you don't have competitive products to compare with? I mean, I think you just have to really understand it goes back to the business and some of those first principles. If you understand their business problem and what they're trying to solve for, you've got to approach it that way. If you're just plugging in a solution without understanding their problem, you're going to have a much harder time. I think back to some of my oil and gas days even, and it was, kind of unbelievable what they would be willing to spend on one part. But because production, each time a well is down, the dollars signs are just astronomical. So they're willing to do what they need to do to get that part. So again, really understanding what their economic why is, and then framing it in that point of view is what will help you, like I said, have a more meaningful conversation with those customers or potential partners. Lindsay, it looks like I am like right on the nose of time.
Yes.
I have no other questions. I nailed it on timing.
Great. Awesome presentation. Thank you so much for being here with us. And you guys can catch up with Amber in the networking sessions if you have more questions or want to continue the discussion on supply chain.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you
Have
so
a great
much.
day.
Okay, welcome, Cathy. How are you?
Good, Lindsay. How are you? I was
Ready.
nervous. I was like, am I in the right area?
You're ready to go. We're going to go ahead and get started with your presentation, addressing the capacity gap that exists in American manufacturing. So I'm going to turn off my mic and camera and give you
Lindsay,
the floor.
real quick question. Do you have the presentation or am I sharing my screen?
You were sharing your screen.
Okay, got it. I wanted to just confirm that. Okay.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. Hey, Cathy, you can go ahead and present your presentation. I don't see it yet.
Yeah, I'm just trying to get it to pop up on my screen here for some reason. Sorry for the technical difficulties. Are you seeing it?
Yes, we are.
You're seeing the presentation now?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. I wanted to get into, I'm going to actually stop sharing. I have to get this to, why is it blocking out for me? Hang on here real quick.
Cathy, would you like to send us your presentation over email so we can share it on your behalf?
You'd like for me to send it to you via email?
If you want to. If you're having some technical difficulties, we can do this. And if you want,
I got it.
You got it? Awesome. All right.
Thank you, Nora.
Of course, thank you.
How are you doing? All right.
Screen. Take it away, Cathy.
All right. Well, thank you. And just want to say thank you to the Women in 3D Printing. What a great organization you have. And I'm, really honored to be here with, presenting at the TIPE 2022 conference. So real quick, I'm super excited to be talking to you all today. I am Cathy Mayerhofer. I'm the Chief Sales Officer at Xometry. And today my subject is going to be just addressing the capacity gap that exists in American manufacturing. And so a couple of things that in terms of a little bit about myself, I lead a team of professionals around the world committed to connecting enterprise buyers with global manufacturers. Our digital marketplace is the largest of its kind, and that gives us a unique insights into the trends that are shaping manufacturing, from the continued rise of 3D printing to macroeconomic forces like COVID, supply chain concerns, rising prices in raw materials, and reshoring. And because we're a digital manufacturer, we can see in near real time the products that are engineered today and which will power the economy for tomorrow. We get to work with really cool stuff. And like you said, it's heady stuff. We're able to see, what's the next great thing, the next rising industries, electronic and autonomous vehicles, to clean energy, robotics, agricultural technology, space exploration, and significant more. So with technologies like additive manufacturing and with the recent passage of the stimulus bill about to kick in, the industry is at its strongest in decades. But there's still plenty of room for growth, both in terms of entrepreneurial and leadership opportunities, particularly for women and people of color. I am as passionate as I am about manufacturing technology, 3D printing, and manufacturing in general. I am equally as passionate about helping women see the boundless opportunities of our chosen profession. So today I will discuss how women and people from diverse communities have been entering the manufacturing field and how we see this new crop of entrepreneurs taking advantage of the great opportunities the recently passed infrastructure bill offers. Additionally, I'll discuss the face of American manufacturing is becoming more diverse and inclusive, and why its increased representation is good for our industry and the broader economy. My colleague, Sophia McDonald, will host a session later today to discuss the ways we all can recruit, retain, and inspire more women and people of color to our industry. And first, a little bit more about myself. I'm in sales, so we like to do that from time to time. I've always been involved in a tech industry. I started in the semiconductor industry, and then my path took me to IT services. And from there, I found manufacturing at Protolabs, where I ran North American sales. And I was able and fortunate enough to follow a female leader who provided me with great mentorship throughout my time at the company. And I really do see that move into manufacturing at the time was really one of the smartest moves I've ever made in my career. And up until I was able to join Xometry. I was so attracted to the company because I find 3D printing to be such a fascinating industry. And I was also drawn to Xometry's business idea, which is a digital marketplace. We enable companies across industries, including those benefiting from the infrastructure stimulus, tap into the huge capacity gap that exists to bring their ideas to life. Technology has always fascinated me, and I've experienced great opportunities throughout my career. I've had the opportunity to see cool products like parts for space exploration built through 3D printing, as well as life-saving products for the medical field make a difference. At Xometry, I'm connecting companies and people with the big ideas and the manufacturers who can place them to life. Advancing innovation in such important and emerging sectors, again, like autonomous and electric vehicles, aeronautics, robotics, space, clean energy, and more are important. 3D printing is gaining serious momentum, and I'm so excited to be along for the ride and share my experience, which I hope will help more women get into the manufacturing field and succeed within it. Sorry about that. So 3D printing is not a new technology, but the advancements in it are exciting and are helping to fuel the momentum that's with it. And when I say that 3D printing is gaining serious momentum, I put this in, just ask my mother, Rosemary. My mother's 93-year-old from little Shakopee, Minnesota. And when I went to tell my mom that I was going to be relocating from Minnesota to Maryland, and of course, you know, she asked me, what am I going to be doing? And I said to her, well, Mom, you know, I'm going to be joining this company. And I always try to keep it kind of high level, didn't really ever want to get too technical with her. And I said, well, you know, they do things like 3D printing. And she says, I don't know if you know what that is. And she goes, oh, for goodness sakes, of course I know what that is. She goes, I watch the news. And she goes, I've seen some really cool things, you know, like they make like prosthetics. And she goes, and they can 3D print food. She goes, are you going to be 3D printing food? And I'm like, no, Mom, I'm not going to be 3D printing food. But we will probably work with organizations that are build the machines to 3D print in food. And I think that says a lot about, you know, about the industry in itself, is that it's the broad nature in which we talk about 3D printing, you know, from TV shows like Westworld on HBO that have given a general audience in terms of what are some of the manufacturing processes that are out there. But I will tell you, my 93-year-old mother if I started talking to her about injection molding or CNC machining or sheet metal fabrication, I would get blank stares. And I find it fascinating that the interest in this is because of just how cool the technology is. So as we know, enterprises are looking to innovate faster, and 3D printing is allowing us to do that. And as more and more organizations adopt 3D printing, we'll see a greater evolution and sustainable products in the long term. So as such, we're seeing more and more diversity in the field thanks to 3D printing entrepreneurs. At Xometry, for example, we're seeing a surge of entrepreneurs, women, veterans, and people from diverse communities take advantage of the great opportunities today's manufacturing marketplace offers. In fact, 1 in 4 manufacturers on our platform are diverse. And I really, really want to see that grow in terms of what that ratio is. And I'm really excited that we have as much diversity that we do have on our platform, but I think that there's so much room for more. So thanks to these entrepreneurs, we're now seeing the impact of their efforts across multiple industries. Manufacturers have previously been very limited by what they can construct and offer. When you think about the decades-old technologies in manufacturing that are out there that still today have their limitations in terms of how parts can be manufactured and the complexities that are there, innovations like 3D printing into our digital marketplace at Xometry really allow us to be able to say yes more to the customer, that yes, we can manufacture their parts, and we can do that. I think as I've also throughout my career, as I've seen, I think probably one of the most important things about the growth opportunities for women and people of diverse backgrounds is that there is seemingly so much more opportunity today. Manufacturing is undergoing a significant transformation. Digitization is disrupting this $260 billion industry and expanding who we're hiring and will help drive it even further. There are so many opportunities today. We are looking, and everybody is looking for really talented people who are excited about technology and excited about what we can do to actually help foster growth in entrepreneurship. Women and people from diverse backgrounds are helping to shake up the industry better than ever. And also, I will say, for the better as well. I'm really quite proud to tell you that 40% of my team is made up of women, and that percentage continues to grow. I work very hard to attract women and attract people from diverse backgrounds, because I think the diversity is so important. Our customers are diverse. I want my sales organization to be diverse as well. And I think women have such a great opportunity to dive into this field and succeed in it. And just the other day, talking to someone who was in part of this orientation, who has a really cool, unique idea, creative idea, figured out how she was going to do it in terms of buying a couple 3D printing machines. And today she's got many 3D printing machines. She's able to have a business that constructed from an idea, a creative idea that she had. And next thing you know, she is manufacturing her own products. I think that is so cool. And it's so interesting to see where we've come. There's so many different career paths within the field to be successful, making a great living and being impactful in such a booming industry. As a chief sales officer, I really get the great opportunity to speak with customers from all over the place. And talking with them helps me to understand the incredible things the industry is doing in turn. And this, of course, helps me grow as well, to think of, if we could do this, we should be able to do this. And I think that that's how we have to think about this when we are talking about 3D printing, that the opportunities become unlimited. And I think and with Xometry, we look to try to help create that limitless innovation for our customers and for our manufacturers. I am exposed to so many things through our network that I never would have touched otherwise, from stuff going into space to electronic and autonomous vehicles I've mentioned before, things that I'm really care about, such as technology that's fighting climate change. I love that we touch these areas and interact with companies who are driving this innovation. And and as I look at the challenges that we're facing today, sorry, I don't mean to, I'll make you dizzy with my moving. I have a touchy mouse. I think Amber touched on it as I listened to her thing in terms of 2020 and what that was as a wake-up call to us all. As we face unprecedented disruption, and the message was clear, we need a more resilient supply chain. Diversifying your network, sourcing more parts from more sources closer to home, and transacting on a platform that eliminates inefficiencies goes a long way towards addressing this. Furthermore, potential disruption isn't the only supply chain issue impacting organizations. Even when a long, brittle supply chain is functioning well, there could stand to be more efficiencies in the process. Xometry uniquely addresses what we like to call the capacity gap that exists in American manufacturing. Because we work directly with thousands of manufacturers, we know available capacity exists in the marketplace. And our marketplace is specifically designed to help manufacturers market their services, manage their cash flow, and gain access to raw materials needed to make their parts and the products for customers. Knowing you have a diversified network that you can really rely upon, ensuring that you get the parts on time and on budget is huge for organizations of all shapes and sizes. Typically, as organizations get closer and closer to full capacity, the little supply chain issues that slow them down become bigger and bigger problems, preventing them from ever reaching their true ceiling. It can take just one part to hold up a customer's production. And so having the capacity in order to solve those issues are significant to them, and having the available options in terms of manufacturing process is significant as well. And we look to eliminate this inefficiency. We can unlock untapped capacity and close the capacity gap. A perfect example of how our platform has helped organizations pivot is how we handled the initial closure of the Chinese market on the onset of the pandemic. We were able to fulfill every one of our jobs that we had going. I like to tell this story, and I'll try to be brief. In January, end of January of 2020, when China needed to shut down in the beginning in Wuhan, we work with, as I mentioned earlier, we worked with many global partners as well as many domestic partners and in Europe as well. We had many jobs that we were running over in China, and we went to our customers and we said, they're closing down for a week. You all know it ended up being like close to 2 months. What can we do to help you? And we can source capacity here in the United States for you. What can you wait, or would you like to do that? And in the beginning, most of our customers chose to wait it out to see how it was going to happen. And then as you can imagine, as China continued to remain closed down, we were able to source more and more of the customers' orders here domestically for them. At about the same time, the United States started shutting down. And Washington State was a hotbed, and it was New York. And basically what we were able to do is work with all of our manufacturers and say, we can help you. If you want to keep your doors open, we can help you. If you need to close your doors or you have to go to a skeleton crew because of issues facing with COVID, we can help you in terms of moving your business and keeping your customers going and keeping their production lines moving as well. And in that time, we never missed a beat. And I continue to fall back on the fact that the manufacturing partners and the capacity that was sitting within our network really showed the resiliency that we were able to provide our customers at that time. So one thing I think that I would like to transition to is, as I talk about how important women and people of diverse backgrounds, looking at the industry in general, I really want to call upon those of you that are out there and those of you that need mentorship, being a mentor and being a mentee. You know, as I have grown and, you know, climbed the ranks within the manufacturing industry, I can say that mentorship are very important and very worthwhile. I was able to be mentored throughout my career by incredible individuals that have helped me learn and grow and succeed. As such, programs like TIPE 3D Printing Conference are so important to this industry. And again, I want to do a big shout out to you and the Women in 3D Printing, because I think that you are there and you can offer up that guidance and advice and find those folks that out there that are just looking for that inspiration or looking for that mentorship that's there. And I think creating platforms like this, where women can provide insights and share success stories, will only help women grow in the presence within this industry. And the increased representation is good for our company, and it will help manufacturing industry continue to thrive and doing even better. And so with that, I just want to say thank you, and I'm happy to take any questions at this time.
Cathy, hi, thank you so much for your presentation. I really loved it. A great example about fulfilling the supply chain need with China shutting down. And I love your commitment to encouraging women to be in manufacturing and the importance of mentoring. I had a couple questions for you that I was hoping you would answer. I wanted to know, what do you think the biggest misperceptions are that women have about working in manufacturing?
So, like an easy answer, because I heard it early on when I joined the manufacturing industry, is it wasn't glamorous enough. And what I mean by that is I think there's still a stigma that's around, you know, the old smoke pipes and dirty manufacturing floors. And I think that type of thing, or in the fact that it's manufacturing, you know, what's unique, what's been innovative about manufacturing has been one area that really has been a challenge for when women think about what types of industries that they would be interested in looking at. And that is why I think, again, why I get back to why these types of events are so important. And actually, you know, it's you know, if my mom knows what 3D printing is and how, you know, cool it is, I think those types of things really help us as well. But I just truly believe, you know, as if we are passionate about this, we need to do our part to embrace women and people of diverse backgrounds and really help to foster them and really help people to think about, think of alternative of industries like 3D printing and why it's, give it a try. Like there's so much innovation, creativity, and again, things that women are great, and can bring to the party.
Yeah, absolutely. Were there any challenges that you encountered on your path to an executive role, and how did you persevere through these challenges?
I do a lot to make myself look younger. So I've been through during those ranks, and being in technology fields forever probably helped, give me my fighting shoes on. I think that, the challenge I have really are not unlike what have been age old, right? Mm-hmm. When you look at technology fields, oftentimes you don't necessarily see what's mirrored there in terms of representation. Mm-hmm. And I think that has been a big part, but I would say that in what I learned and what I did was I actively sought out mentorship. And again, I keep saying that again, but I actively did. And my first mentors were men in my career because that's mostly who were around. But as we were able to find those women that were there, I really clung on to them and used them in order to help foster my career.
Yeah. What kind of skills do you think are critical to being successful in manufacturing?
I think, you know, curiosity, I think is really, really important, is that asking, you know, because I think, you know, it's all about innovation. And so if you are curious and you are interested in what people do, I mean, I see things that look like potentially the most mundane type of part. And yet when you start talking to customers about what it's going into, it's like fascinating.
Yeah.
And I think that is probably your number one skill that you can embrace in it, because then that curiosity, then the next one challenges you to want to learn more. I mean, I didn't know anything about 3D printing 10 years ago. And then I think of the advantages, you know, I think about the work that Carbon has done in terms of their processes. And I find it to be fascinating all the time. Oh, we lost Lindsay. All right. Is there any other questions that are out there?
I have a question for you.
Sorry.
There you go,
got
Kristen.
disconnected.
Okay, everybody's
I got disconnected from TIPE, so I apologize for the
No problem.
For the delay. We do have a question. How exactly did you actively seek out mentorship?
Okay, so again, years ago, I actually read an article. I think it was like in high school. I know it was people used to read magazines. And it was a magazine called Newsweek, and they were talking, it was like big corporations that were talking about mentorship and what it meant. And, you know, and they brought it down to my little high school self in terms of, you know, what that meant. So I honestly, like, that's how I looked at it. And so teachers that were became my first mentors. And then, you know, guiding advice in terms of like, what should I do with my career? You know, do I want to be a lawyer? You know, I mean, but, you know, I've always, I think that's how I've sought them out, really were in terms of what I, you know, when I was, you know, when I just needed guidance or like was having a hard time decision, or when I was like, I've got this challenge or whatever, like help me think through how I can work this. And I will say I actively participate in professional mentor programs, as a way to give back, if you will.
Yeah, I think that's great.
Oh, Lindsay keeps getting kicked out. Let's see, is there any questions in that? And I know my time is almost up. I have like 2 minutes here. There may not be any other ones that are there. I'm looking through the.
Oh my!
I think, Cathy, one thing I'm curious to ask about is just kind of following up more on the mentorship thing. I think a lot of people are always actively looking for mentors. And I've been asked multiple times, you know, do you literally go out and just say, hey, would you like to be my mentor? Or do you go about it in a little bit more of a subtle sort of way?
So that is actually a great question, because I've had people come to me and I just don't necessarily have the time to do it. So especially if I'm in a professional, if I'm working with a couple of people on an ongoing basis mentorship, which is generally like 6 months to a year, a program, if you will, in terms of like helping them to reach some goals that they have. But when I think about it in terms of like even my sales leaders, which by the way, I've like incredibly talented female sales leaders. I look to, you know, I will look at them in terms of mentorship, and they can come to me at any point. I keep myself available for them to mentor. But when in my own seeking of it, I'm very much like I want to talk in terms of mentorship. Doesn't necessarily have to be this long program commitment, but it could be, can we just have coffee and have just a discussion? And I think that's a great start to go, because sometimes you feel a little vulnerable about asking for help or asking for guidance. And something as simple as that is a great start for yourself to put you in that position that you could actually work with somebody.
Good advice. Great advice. Thank you so much for your presentation today, Cathy. We really appreciated hearing from you. A lot of great information.
Thank you. And thank you for having me, and great work, everybody.
Thank you.
Hello.
Hey, Lauren, how are you? I understand you're going to kick us off with a video.
That's correct.
Okay, great. And then I'm going to bring your panelists on stage and you can introduce them.
Okay, thank you, Lindsay. Well, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. For many years, the additive community has discussed the benefits of using additive technology in production. However, approximately 2 years ago, the benefits became a reality on a global scale. Before I introduce the panel, we're going to take you back 2 years when the world as we know it changed.
I want to talk to you about the project you worked on together to create Face Shield.
Thank you. And now I want to introduce the panel. So today, obviously, you can see from that video, there was a major disruption in the world. And I'm here with four panelists. I think we're waiting on one more to discuss how additive manufacturing, the supply chain, is moving into production over these last couple of years at an accelerated pace. First, I would like to introduce Alyssa Welch. She is the Global Marketing Manager at AMT PostPro. AMT is a global additive manufacturing technology company that is focused on streamlining the additive manufacturing workflow through its suite of post-process equipment. And they're really trying to take equipment and move it from a manual, costly environment to a high volume automated process. Alyssa, I've worked with now for the past year, and she really is a go-getter and open to taking on any challenge that comes her way. Next up, I would like to introduce Guayente Sanmartin. She is the general manager and global head of HP's MJF business. And she's responsible for overseeing all the technology, operations, commercial, and new business incubation activities. HP provides robust series of 3D printing equipment that's used throughout the world, both in prototyping and production applications. Guayente inspired me during a visit she had. She was bringing her daughter to a prestigious university here in the United States. And, she helped show that the future of additive manufacturing is now, and that we have the capability to advance AM at an accelerated pace, given the changing environment. And then next up, I would like to introduce Tracy Brent. She's the president and COO of the Technology House. It's a contract manufacturing company located in Ohio in the United States. And we're primarily focused on aerospace and defense, medical, and industrial applications. And we do a wide array of additive manufacturing processes we have in-house: injection molding, cast urethane, and machining. Tracy is one that never meets a problem that she can't solve. And then last but certainly not least is Carrie Braun. She's an optomechanical engineer at L3Harris. L3Harris is an end customer of additive technology focused on aerospace and defense industry. Carrie is in the photonics and quantum sciences research and development division. And I don't know what else to say about that because that's impressive enough. So we have a great panel discussion, again, to talk about additive manufacturing, the supply chain. As you've seen other presentations today, it's a very dynamic, changing, and there's been a lot of disruptions in the past 2 years. So with that, my leading question for the panel is, lives were changed at the beginning of 2020, as we can see from the video that we had. Please provide an overview of what's changed in both the general manufacturing supply chain and also within the additive supply chain over the past couple of years. Tracy, would you like to lead us off?
Sure. 2020 was a very, all of a sudden everything shuts down and all of your normal production parts you do come to a screeching halt. So in the additive industry, it was amazing how fast they picked up the ball, especially in the medical world, and were able to start designing, again, as you saw in the video, designing swabs and headbands and apparatuses for hospitals that were needed. And I think what really happened was the additive industry got the push it needed that for years we've been trying to do, of the heads of hospitals and companies to say, yes, let's do this. And this is the time to do it because we can get it pushed through and approved. We weren't before, we were too afraid to do it before. We just didn't want to take the time to figure out how to do it before. It was a need. And so you got the people that needed to get things approved to push things through in a very fast way. And as we're seeing now, it's here to stay because they see it works.
Yeah, I agree with that. Definitely. Since the beginning of the start of the pandemic, you see, or we immediately saw the additive industry step in to fill in those gaps of the supply chain shortages all across the globe. And I think that despite all of the negatives that came with COVID, this definitely opened up the door to numerous additive applications. And I think that something that the pandemic really did prove was all of the mass capabilities that additive has to offer, and that 3D printing really does have an influential role in the manufacturing supply chain.
I would just add that I know, like many, we have seen the video, no, and everybody is seeing, it opened up the eyes for big CEOs of companies to really rethink not only the manufacturing processes, but also the way the supply chain is structured. No, today I was reading an article from McKinsey that was saying that the agenda of 2022 for the CEO is going to be an operational agenda, meaning that the CEOs today, one of their main jobs, is going to be to rethink everything related to the supply chain, and that they could even lose 42% of their profit in the next 10 years if they don't take actions. So that I think it's this is as we are all saying, it was the time for now. This is true. You need to change.
Thank you. And, as the disruption happened within the material and labor supply chain within traditional manufacturing, Additive, from our experience, has been able to keep up. There hasn't been as material issues in getting your material through additive manufacturing. Why is that? Why is it so difficult to get material for injection molding, machining, sheet metal, etc., but Additive has been able to keep up their supply? Guayente, will you lead this one?
On this thing, I think there has been also shortages, no? And I have been checking, for the different materials in the market. It's true that the additive manufacturing materials have been less affected, but they have been affected as the rest of materials due to shortages of employees, as well as certain, parts of the world from shipping problems, as well as basic material. There has been, it's true, as you said, that they have been not that big as the rest. And the main reason, I think, has been additive manufacturing. It's a segment, especially for materials that have a higher margin. It's lower volume, compared to injection molding. So if you have to protect one thing that you want for sure to supply, you usually protect those that are strategic investment, that where you have more revenue, and like the volumes are smaller. So I think that has been one of the reasons, on the less shortages that compared to other parts.
Yeah, I would agree. Actually, as my picture changes, and can you all hear me?
Yes.
Yes, we can hear you.
Perfect. All right. We'll just watch as the picture changes. But I also want to kind of roll in with question one is, as the end user, we're more of, L3 Harris is more of a, I guess, almost like boutique or like one-off. But with that, we're usually going through the design cycle much more frequently. And a big change between now for, in terms of also for additive and traditional machining, is design engineers are actually taking into account in their design process about availability. So we actually see almost like 2x, 3x times for machined or fabricated parts. And also we're even asking the question of, does the print shop have this? What's the lead time for any of our service bureaus, and having to take that into account as we're trying to figure out what materials to use and how to best be able to meet our customers' needs. Before, we just assumed it would always be there. And that's one big change I've seen with COVID is design engineers from the very beginning are having asked the question of, will it be here?
Wow. No, that's very insightful for what is happening in the environment today, because you don't know if it's going to be there.
Just chime in on this subject also. They, I know that a lot of our customers are medical, so they'll call out the specific plastic and brand of plastic. And I think what this has taught a lot of our end users is that they have to dual source things, and maybe not even just dual source materials. Some of our customers have even dual sourced processes. So if they were traditionally mold injection, they will also do HP manufacturing. So it's not just, so if one industry's hit, they can switch processes also. So they validate both up front.
So that leads us into some of the success stories, because you mentioned within the supply chain, medical customers are starting to validate multiple processes. So the next question for you is, provide us a success story on how AM has helped overcome those barriers in traditional manufacturing. What advantages does AM have over some of those traditional manufacturing processes to make it appealing to our end use customers? Carrie, would you want to lead us off on this one?
Yeah, sure. I would really say that it really excited our management, I would say, here. We were able to see all these success stories about how quickly the medical community was able to adopt and figure out how to use additive and be agile and work that way, and having these success stories, right? You know, defense and medical, right? That has this huge barriers to be able to have risk, right? You know, it makes sense. And our management got so excited and said, we want a piece of this. We're able to design and iterate so quickly. Imagine if we're able to put that in our own system. So seeing all these success stories, you know, everywhere that we're able to quickly use additive, I think it was really pushed forward and brought that recognition of, wow, this is something that we should figure out how to use in more places, which, you know, it was always kind of a nice thought, but now it's very much at the front of everyone's mind. And it's great to see.
If I look at an NHP, you know, like we're focusing mainly on the 4 main segments, one being healthcare, the other consumer goods, industrial and mobility. And we have seen across each, you know, like different successes, no? Of especially, for example, on automotive, like companies have had, the big brands have always, you know, have been for a long time with some 3D machines, but they were being used there, you know, only for some proto, and now they are seriously considering, you know, to move parts, especially for those parts that are, you know, like for the electrical vehicle. So this is, you know, like a lot of successes. On the consumer goods, I can tell you that like we have been working a lot with L'Oreal, you know, and for their manufacturing lines on how to change, you know, the what they call the packs, you know, enabling the L'Oreal, you know, to change the amount of products that were being built at a time. They have been seriously, you know, like deploying this into their manufacturing line. So it's more like what we call the application on gist and fixtures. And it has helped them, you know, like save 33% on the cost, you know, and like save 66% of the time that was required, you know, for this before. So it's just like to name a few, but like the good thing is like big brands are starting, you know, to consider. Still, it'll take a while, and we'll talk about it on why, no, to fully explode, but the potential is huge.
Yeah, I agree. Kind of to echo that, you know, one of the main advantages that I think Additive has to offer is the mass customization and the ability to quickly iterate designs and manufacture on demand in any part of the world. And kind of bringing back the whole COVID aspect of that, a great example of this is the nasal swabs that we saw produced in response to COVID in the supply chain. So you have companies like Zigzag that immediately at the start of the pandemic started utilizing their fleet of HP technology combined with AMT's PostPro chemical vapor smoothing to produce high volumes of these nasal swabs and supply all of the hospitals around Europe. And they were able to pass the necessary tests for medical approval. And all of this happened in a matter of weeks and months and was enabled by Additive, to where traditional methods just wouldn't allow that.
Tracy, do you have anything to add for this question?
No, I think they pretty much covered it.
You have a lot of successes in Technology House, so you can share many.
There are. So, as you could see, there was a lot of success stories within the additive space these last 2 years, propelling that growth and really showing from, a global scale. I know here at the Technology House in 2020, we had probably over 60-70% of our additive machines doing production activities, which then dropped off to once the market was flooded with face shields, nasal swabs, et cetera, back to more of the prototyping phase. But it showed and accelerated the growth. I think, Guayente, you mentioned to upper level management and them seeing, and Carrie, you may have mentioned as well, seeing the possibilities to drive it forward. But, although there's a lot of advantages to AM, what are some of the challenges that still exist for AM to continue that adoption to accelerating that production?
I can take that one. I think from all the success stories, I think we've closed the gap. But the biggest thing is AM has traditionally been a prototype or low volume production or consumer product where there aren't as many FDA approvals and audit approvals and such. And it's an eye opener when you're starting to validate machines that all the stuff that medical and aerospace need for lot control, material, knowing what exactly is touching their parts, the humidity control, temperature control, lot numbers, and especially with a lot of the additive processes, you mix lots of material together as you're making products. So I think it's also helped us as manufacturers push back onto the additive machine makers to say, hey, how do we figure this stuff out so we can validate these processes? And since they've started doing medical stuff, they see why it needs to be done. So I think there's some more work to still do, but we've come a long way just in the past year of what we were last year and why we couldn't use it for a lot of medical aspects to today. A lot of it is going that way. And we figured out how to lot control and material control these processes.
I would add that I see the challenges in 3 buckets. The first bucket is what I call the customer challenge. And then there are several, as we said, how knowledgeable, the company, the engineers are, and how much the CEOs are really asking their teams, to move into these new technologies. So that and also the capacity for the companies to know which parts are very good for additive manufacturing and not, and selecting those applications, for the type of geometry, for the design on savings, for, the uniqueness, the personalization. So selecting those parts, is the first challenge. And as you said, Tracy, is this move to production, not only staying in prototype. And that's what I call, the customer challenges. Then I call what is called the part challenge, and is related to the technology. Okay, so still we need to continue, all of us working on the technology to ensure that we can meet, all the KPI dimensions and characteristics of the part. We need to continue bringing costs down. We need to evolve, the materials and what I call the part repeatability. So the systems today, there are few of them, that can produce parts, in production, but that the machines can produce the part once and again. And the third challenge is what I call the industrialization challenge. Printing a part is just one part of the process, and like our friend Alyssa and others will know, but then you need to produce a product out of this part printed. There is a full industrialization, and that's all the automation on the digital and the physical aspect, is one thing that needs to be rebuilt for AM. So a lot of challenges, still that we have, but as I said, there are many companies and few of us were working on them to solve them.
Yep, I agree with that. In my opinion, surface quality is one of the main challenges in enabling additive to be used for end-use part production, and being able to have that surface quality that one can meet the standards for applications such as medical or automotive or aerospace, and are able to compete with their traditionally manufactured counterparts. As you mentioned, that raw state of the 3D printed part off the printer has surface imperfections that don't meet these standards. So you need technologies and post-processing to completely finish these parts and make them more durable and able to pass the necessary tests to be ready for end use.
And I love, by the way, like in the chat there are comments, so I would love, to get other challenges, that like our attendees are hitting. So like it would be great. Just add, I see Carol, thank you for adding more challenges. I know we agree with some of them, and consumer goods, there may be parts that are not good, for additive manufacturing. And I think that's, again, I go back to the customer challenge, selecting those parts that have a unique value, where additive manufacturing will bring the cost, the material, the sustainability that you cannot get with other technologies, I think is the first step. So keep adding.
And one thing I think it too is kind of going to the customer again is educating the engineers as well as everybody else about what it takes for it actually making additive manufacturing an actual tool, right? You need to be thinking about it from the very beginning, right? And the more educated our engineers or design engineers are about how, not only how to design for it, but the limitations to it, right? Just like any other manufacturing method helps so much more in terms of being able to have it be utilized more, right? It's not taking something traditionally machined and replaced by additive, but have it be something in their process as they design it in the very beginning. And that just comes and informs more as we educate people. Mm-hmm. I think that's a major, major hurdle and informs the rest of it to push it forward.
It was mentioned on being able to the traceability, lot control, and highly regulated industries. What are some of the machine manufacturers doing? I know Alyssa, AMT is going through trying to help automate these processes. What is AMT doing to help on that traceability front in order to track those parts throughout the process?
So that end use parts, for them to be enabled to be used in different applications, that requires, if it's one part being used for medical, okay, that one particular part needs to undergo the series of tests. We can't just say every single part that goes through our machine is 100%, passes the tests for those. But one thing we are doing on our side is we are gathering this data. I know right now we have a bunch of data on tests that we've passed for like TPU, PA11, PA12, various materials with different printing technologies. And so from our side, we're gathering that data to help validate the process and open the doors for it to be used in more applications.
And Guayente, I know HP is doing a lot on the software front. Is that, from your perspective, is that helping with the traceability of the product throughout the entire system?
Yeah, I think it does. As I told you, there are different parts, like on the challenges, and there will be software assets that we need to develop into the part repeatability and into the industrialization of the part, which include this one. So it's a fundamental. I think that when we think about an application, we need to think what are the different assets, from materials, software, hardware, services that we need to put together in order to deliver, this part. So yeah, very important.
And that leads me into my next question is, how will the AMT community overcome these challenges? Not only did I hear discussing on traceability, but cost as a challenge, and, amongst the others you mentioned.
Was that for AMT? Sorry.
For AMT, yep.
So one way that we're helping reduce overall cost per part, we just launched our next generation chemical vapor smoothing technology, the SF series, which that is a more higher throughput machine, and it uses less consumables, which all of that overall reduces the overall cost per part. you're going from traditional methods of manual post-processing to now being able to finish an entire batch of parts in the matter of 90 to 120 minutes. And so, and overall reducing the cost per part, that's through automation, is what we're doing.
What else does the AM industry have to do in order to accelerate adoption?
I think it's to keep doing what we've made progress on this year. Don't let it slow down. Keep the heads of companies, as in the HPs of the world, and the customers, the medical customers, going full throttle and not slide back into traditional manufacturing. To all the new products, at least have it a visual showing that we can do this. We can make a nice looking part that can go through a hospital system, and keep pushing the not materials, but the traceability with the additive processes. Again, we've learned a lot this year, and everything that we've learned, we've been working with the AM groups of the world to say this is what we need. Yet we're also pushing on our customers, saying, why do you need this? Is it just because you've always had it, or is it there for a reason, or are you just somebody put it there for the fun of it to make it more challenging for us, and we don't need this? Or what is the information you really need to get out of this to see if we can get around it some other way with the technologies we have? And again, when you mold injected something, you made a tool. If there were any changes to it, you would do an ECO, and it would take 16 weeks. The challenge with, again, going back to the AM, is it was traditionally a prototype process. So as our prototype minds work, oh, I want this change, we're ready just to do it. But we also have to realize that when you're working with the medical and aerospace customers of the world, you can't just do it. You still have to go through some of the hoops that you did with traditional. It's gonna go faster, but you still have to do your validated runs. You have to run tests and submit ECOs the way you would with a traditional tool. The good is really cheaper. You still have to run the test, and it's going to be some kind of NRE, but it's not going to be as much as doing this, changing the tool, and ooh, does it work? Oh, it kind of works. You can still do a couple of iterations if you need slight tweaks on it. But it's just to dial up the speed of the end customer and still dial down the speed of the people that are used to working in AM, and meet somewhere in the middle ground.
Yeah, that's really encouraging, right? Like just the traceability coming along, because I always think of, we're doing our best to understand the processing, being able to qualify a machine and the material as well. Because for an aerospace engineer, they'll pull up volume 3 of a stack of a 3-ring binder will tell you all about cold rolled steel, right? I can tell you all about what's going to happen with all these material process based off of, thousands of coupons, right? It seems so boring, but it's wonderfully boring. Like, because it's just, we have that traceability. We know what is going on and how it's going to react. And we're starting to get there. I really think so. We also have a lot of work being done by the American Standards of ASTM, and testing methods, and as well as ASME, right, for design, so that we're out ahead of it, as well as able to do that in production as well. So I think we have we're going in the right direction. I think COVID turbocharged a lot of the things we've been trying to do for a long time. That's the right way to say it.
And I think we'll need to continue, as I said, with these 3 pillars that I mentioned before. On the customer, I think we need to be teach and from a customer perspective learn again what are the specific parts that have a benefit, by being done on additive manufacturing. Second, I think we need to move our devices to be real production devices, not just prototyping, which will mean increase the system repeatability and increase materials. And I think the third thing, is in order to have mass customization, we need all the software, end to end. We need to facilitate the digital and the physical workflow, to help them be automated. So that's the efforts, that we need to keep pushing.
Great. So as I oversee the finance and accounting at our company, I have to throw in a little finance industry thing. But in the finance world, there's really a push for sustainable investing. So, or it's called ESG, environmental, social, and governance. And, people want to invest in companies that they believe in, that fit their value system. How is the 3D printing contributing to achieving sustainability or, different climate change goals? Guayente, do you want to lead us off on this one?
Well, I can tell you first, I think this is one question that for HP as a company is very important, HP has decided, has a sustainability goals, and we have been, in fact, when we think about sustainability, we think about three aspects, what is climate change, the other is human rights, and the other is more linked to the community that we call digital equity. And despite you asked, for the climate, let me tell you that as part of the sustainability, and we are in an event full of fantastic women, I think HP is the first technology company that has made a claim that they want to have 50% of the leadership, by 2030 to be women, so that's the first, on the second, of course, not related to climate action, HP has decided to achieve net zero greenhouse gas emission across all HP value chain by 2040, reach carbon neutrality by the HP operations by 2025. So it's just around the corner. So that and I think just from a 3D point of view, not our technology, which is using powder that you can recycle, not like others, and all these programs, not that we have the Take Back program, I think are just a few things. So I do believe this is not only the financial point of view, as you say, Lauren, people want to invest on those companies, is the right thing to do, and only companies that have this purpose, that is truly authentic, purpose to help on the society and the world will survive. So that's I encourage everyone to think what are the sustainable goals and make actions on them.
Yeah, definitely want to help our environment. And it's great because like you mentioned, HP with the recycling of the material is huge and makes the operations aspect more efficient as well. So no, it's very important there. And then our last question is, what is the future of 3D printing? We've seen an acceleration. As Tracy mentioned, we don't want it to stop. The adoption has been significant. It's been proven out. The FDA's done emergency acceptance of various product these last couple of years. What is the future?
I'll jump in on this one. I mean, I think the future of 3D printing is right now. I mean, we're starting to see an immediate and positive shift from low volume prototyping to now more high volume end use applications. And I think, going back again, the past couple of years, everything that we've accomplished and proven through COVID has really enabled the industry to leap forward. And I think that in order for the industry to gain greater adoption of additive for more applications, it'll require all of everyone in the additive ecosystem to all come together. So it's not just about the materials, it's not just about the printers, it's about the design, the software, the materials, the printers, and the post-processing solutions that really drive these high value products that enable the mass adoption of additive.
I think the future, if we can come up with post-processing solutions, that will help tremendous push for things to either switch or lessen traditional manufacturing to go to AM, because with getting the AMT, we have switched processes from traditional processes, molding processes, to HP and then AMT. And there are parts that we were struggling to get out like 30 pieces a week because of the finishing on them and the way they looked, to now our customer actually is like, whoa, you can slow down now because you are producing more than like our whole order in a month. So we are able to just, fill a bucket of HP on, and then the same amount can go into the AMT process, and they look better than the molding process was, just because of the size and thickness of the parts. So I think with the post-processing on board and trying to work on the labor part of the additive manufacturing process, the better and better we will be able to get. And that will also start to help bring the cost down, because the labor costs will go down of the parts.
And I think what is the future? I think 3D, and like it has already been told many times, but 3D is one of the few technologies that is gonna reshape industries, no? And like if we look, 3D has the capacity to transform ecosystems, no, and workflows, no, and you can see, how 3D is helping on the healthcare, like distributing, from aligners directly to the consumer. So is changing like supply chains, how is changing the footwear industries, no, and how is changing the even more the packaging, like for molded folded fiber molded, like in order to create sustainable packaging. So I think like the 3D is meant to be a technology to transform industries, and we will see more and more more of those. I'm watching closely, many startups, that they take a problem in an industry and they develop the solution and the full ecosystem, and it's amazing, So this is meant to transform the work and make advancements from a world perspective.
Great. Carrie, any last comments? I saw you're going in and out there, so if you can hear us.
Yeah, a little bit. Well, so one other perspective too is we're able to see AM being used more as a production tool, but we're also seeing, especially that, right now we have a lot of really great materials. We're pushing the boundaries there. We're having a lot of good science being done. But one thing that is, I don't think really talked about, but one thing I'm really noticing is that the optical and photonics community is taking notice of additive. A lot of major conferences, the entire track is devoted to what research is being done for optics to be able to do better resolution, to be able to get smaller parts, to be able to have better granularity. And I think that's something that we're in scan packs, especially, oh my gosh, of really seeing, I think we're going to see in the next, 5-10 years, really take off and be able to, not even be able to imagine it, but significantly improve where we are with a lot of key things. So that was just something for the future additive I think isn't really talked about. We don't really know yet, but I think it's going to get really big very soon.
Great. Well, thank you, everyone. I think we're out of time now. Lindsay's
Yeah,
there.
that was a great discussion. Thank you all. You're all intriguing and well-informed women. Thanks so much for joining us at the conference. And we are going to head back to the main floor for some networking. So if anybody in our audience wants to catch up with these wonderful ladies, then please meet us back on the networking floor for more. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
you.
Lindsay, and thank you, Lauren, for inviting us. Thank you.